Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to another drmyrna Minute. We are in week 2 of Love, Lust, and Lament. As we wait for some more persons to get in, I am listening to Tamala Mann, Safety in His Arms. That's where I wanna be. Oh, in His arms. That's where I find God's peace, and I find safety in His love. Safety in His arms. I find peace in His arms. In His arms. That is where I want to be. This is another beautiful song as we continue just to rest and learn and to hear. Hopefully be drawn into the presence of God so that we can continue on this journey of healing and restoration, self-awareness, as we reauthor our story to a story that embraces wholeness and understanding and self-awareness. And this is a love song to God. Thank you for joining and welcome. Just a few more minutes. In His arms, in His arms, that is where I want to be. I think this is a beautiful song as we look at emotional attachments. And especially when we are reminded of what a secure attachment is in comparison to insecure attachments. And so for me, my Christian framework tells me that God is our first secure attachment because God teaches us what love is by providing us love and giving us love. Therefore, providing us a secure attachment in God, allowing us to be able to enter into loving and healthy relationships with a clear understanding of what love is. To keep me free from harm, and there's joy that I will find to ease my troubled mind. It's in His arms. It's in God's arms. Let us go to the throne of grace. Gracious and eternal God, who has shown us and demonstrated to us what secure love is, what it means to love, and how we're able to love. God, we thank you for teaching us. God, I pray that your presence will be experienced in community on this evening. Allow us to understand what it means to be in a secure relationship, a relationship that's built on love, a relationship that's built on trust, a relationship that's built on vulnerability, a relationship that's built on interdependence, God. So, God, we thank you for teaching us what it means to be in and enter into a secure relationship. And we come to you surrendering all that we carry into this space as we place our trust, as we place our hope, as we place our confidence in you. Continue to remain with us as you allow us and journey alongside us to reauthor our story, that we may be healthy, that we may be well, mind, body, and spirit. In your Son, Jesus the Christ's name, we pray. Amen. Good evening. I want to thank each of you for tuning in this evening. We are in week 2 of our series, Love, Lust, and Lament. And so tonight we're going to keep it real because I'm going to be exploring sex and looking at how insecure attachment styles operate when we consider what sex is, when we think about what is romantic love, when we think about what does it mean to be in a relationship. And as I said earlier, for me, my Christian framework is the foundation, and it teaches me what secure love is, what secure attachment is, because we know that God gave his only begotten son and that God loved us first. And because God loved us first, we are able to not only love ourselves, but we are able to love one another. And we can find God's love in First John chapter 4 and 19. Right. So let us begin. I want to thank you again for tuning in to another Dr. Myrna Minute as we continue to explore insecure emotional attachments. But this week, we're going to be looking at them in correlation to having an intimate and sexual relationship. So I want to be able to explore what does it mean to have not just a sexual relationship, but casual sex? What does it look like when we are in a romantic relationship? And what does it look like when we are in the throes of lust? Because all of that can be impacted by our insecure attachment style, right? Whether we're aware of it or whether we are not aware of it. So take a moment, put your thoughts in the chat. What comes up for you as I begin to talk about sex and casual sex and what does it mean to be in a romantic relationship and the concept of each? Are we using sex and intimacy for pleasure? Are we using it to create purpose? Are we using it to give ourselves value and identity? Are we using it to feel loved? Are we using it to feel wanted? Are we using it to feel a sense of closeness? Or are we detached? Are we emotionally attached? Are we unable to attach even sexually? And so we use it just as an activity, not to really draw close and to experience that connection in that moment. And so, as we consider the use and reflect on love and lust, I want us to also look at motives and attachments and the risks, right? So, I want you to ponder these questions. What does romantic love mean to you? What does romantic love mean to you? What impact has romantic love had on the way that you perceive sex and intimacy? What impact has romantic love have on the way that you perceive sex and intimacy? How does your emotional attachment style affect your sexual and intimate relationships? How does your emotional attachment style affect your sexual and intimate relationship? And lastly, in relation to intimacy and sex, how has your perceptions of sex and intimacy affected your levels of trust, affected your vulnerability, affected your how you give affection and how you receive affection, and also your self-awareness and your ability to be open with another? So let us begin. Love, lust, and casual sex. And so I think it's important for us to be able to examine, well, what is romantic love, right? And so for me, romantic love fosters emotional attachment. It is a deep, caring, and intimate connection within a relationship. It is a deep bond of affection where one is committed to and connected to another. We are connected emotionally as well as spiritually. We foster growth and development when we are in a romantic love relationship. We foster acceptance and support. We foster trust and honesty. We foster respect and value. We foster friendship and partnership. We foster intimacy and sensual affection. We foster communication and collaboration. And we foster patience, grace, and understanding from my framework of what romantic love is. Okay. And so my understanding of romantic love is nurtured or wrapped around my understanding of who God is. right? Because earlier I said that God is the one who teaches us. God is our first teacher for me of what it means to be in a secure relationship, what it means to have a secure attachment, and what it means to be able to experience love because God first loved us. Therefore, because God first loved us, God modeled for us what is love. Therefore, teaching us what love means and how to love, right? So, with that being said, we're able to receive love from God. And because we were able to receive love from God, we're able to be able to enter into relationships with others. We're able to have a healthy understanding or connection with another person. So, in terms of casual sex, I'm referring to sexual acts. I'm talking about oral sex, vaginal sex, anal sex, any type of form of sexual touching is what I'm talking about tonight. I'm talking about mutual and agreeable, uncommitted relationship when I talk about it in terms of casual sex, right? And so let me say that when I speak in terms of casual sex, I'm not correlating it to romantic love because sometimes we have this idea or we carry this notion that in order for us to experience love that we have to have sex, right? And so I really want us to be able to decipher between the two, between the difference between romantic love and then the difference between casual sex, right? And so some of the types of casual sex in our cultural context today, I'm going to give the name and I'm going to give the definition for that type of sex. Now, all of these forms of sex, they may be mutual. However, there's no emotional attachment, right? So that's the first difference in my framework for romantic love. There is no emotional no attachment. There is no affection, right? And so the first one is booty call. And so booty call is sex on contact, demand, sex with no emotional attachment. There's no commitment, right? The next one is a F buddy, right? I don't have to say the term because I'm pretty sure y'all get the gist of it. So a F buddy has regular sex with someone without commitment, without emotional attachment, right? The next one is no strings attached. This is a mutual benefit of sexual relationship, again, with no commitment. We learn or we hear about hookups. Hookups are sexual encounters between people who are not dating and who are not in a committed relationship. Again, no emotional attachment. Friends with benefits may be familiar with one another. They may even have a friendship and they decide to have a sexual relationship with one another. But again, they enter into this relationship just for sex. There's no emotional attachment, there's no commitment. And in this type of relationship, it can be ongoing. But again, there's no commitment, there's no emotional attachment. And so all of these are consensual aspect of sex or entering into sexual relationship with one another, not in a committed sense, but in mutual agreement, right? And it is outside of the scope of a romantic relationship. Although some of these forms, when we look at it from an anxious style of attachment, it occurs because the person who has an anxious form of attachment, they have sex because they desire to feel love and experience love. But the downside of that is they will not receive it from those types of casual relationships because they may be hooking up with someone who has an avoidant emotional attachment style, right? And so someone that's avoidant enters into casual sex because they don't want to have an emotional connection to anyone, right? They don't want to feel. It's just sex, right? From that framework. And so when we look at lust, is an intense impulse of giving into one's desires, right? And so when we think in terms of lust, it can be a person, it could be an object, and it can even be a position. But some things I want to point at as we look at lust is lust brings our attention to our lack of self-control, right? Lust may correlate to our feelings of emptiness, can correlate to our feelings of having a void within us, can also lead us to establishing distorted views. And I say that because lust allows us to be vulnerable in an unhealthy way because there's a loss of self. There's a lack of self worth. We can devalue ourselves when we give into the lust that I'm talking about tonight. And so lust can also be destructive because persons develop unhealthy habits that can destroy the spirit, right? That can destroy the spirit, right? And so when I think of destroying the spirit, I think of terms of manipulation. I think of lying. I think of someone who may give into this intense desire of lust, may not consider the feelings or the emotions of the other person, right? And so that's why I say that it can be destructive in this form. And so when we think of insecure attachment styles, they hinder our growth and understanding of how we regulate our emotions. They hinder our ability to establish healthy emotional patterns. They don't address what we really need, right? What they do is cover up instead, right? So someone who is avoidant, they cover up what they did not receive in their early development. They cover up the fact that they didn't feel like they got what they needed, right? So instead of them becoming or experiencing that type of rejection again, they have a sense of autonomy or independence because they want to maintain control of their emotions, right? And so they do that by avoidance, by avoiding to feel, by avoiding allowing themselves to express themselves emotionally or even open themselves up or become vulnerable when we look at relationships, right? So, insecure attachment styles cover up rather than process, rather than deal with, rather than cope with, rather than explore the unmet emotional needs, right? And this is important as we think in terms of motives and attachment, because someone that may be operating in an avoidant attachment style may embrace casual sex because they want to avoid closeness at all costs, right? They want to avoid being rejected. They want to avoid anything that's going to cause them to feel less than, right? They want to avoid getting hurt. And so they may develop a framework or understanding of, okay, I'll just have sex because I don't need anyone else. I'm going to enjoy this and get some pleasure out of this, and I'm not going to be hurt, right? And this is from the framing of someone that may be operating in an avoidant attachment style. It allows them to remain in control. It allows them to keep from getting hurt. It allows them to depend on themselves. So part of when I talked about the romantic type of love, there is an interdependence, right? There is the need for the other. And when we are in secure relationships and we have a secure attachment style, we are able to experience this and recognize this, right? We're able to be interdependent. We're able to be vulnerable with the other. We're able to depend on the other, right? And vice versa. However, someone who was avoidant don't want to depend on anybody but themselves because they don't want to be hurt. They don't want to be rejected, right? And so they buy into this message that they are good alone and that they don't need to connect on an emotional level, right? However, someone that's operating in an anxious attachment style may believe that they want the approval of. They want to feel love. They want to feel desired. They want to feel wanted. So they may enter into casual sex because they desire the need to feel love. But on the flip side of that, they're really setting themselves up for failure because they're not going to get what they need, right? They're not going to get that unmet emotional need met because someone who is interested in casual sex is not interested in connecting with someone emotionally, right? And so that's why I say they set themselves up for failure and can further hinder themselves and develop in a healthy way because they're focusing on this need and this desire that they want, but they're going about it the wrong way. And so someone that's anxious, they want to gain attention, they want to gain approval, right? And we talked about the downside. And another downside when it comes to someone that's anxious and operating in this manner is that when they don't get that need met, they can become obsessive, right? Even though the other person acknowledged that this is just a sexual relationship, there's no commitment, I'm not trying to be connected to you, right? Which can further cause harm to the person that's operating in the anxious emotional attachment style because that's truly not what they want. What they truly want is to feel connected. What they truly want is to feel love. And so they may use sex to give them what they need, but they're not really getting that unmet need, what they wanted. They're not really getting that. Okay. And so sex is something they don't really want. They may not even enjoy it, right? Because their outcome or their motive is to feel love, is to feel wanted, but that is not what they get in return. But also another downside is that emotionally they can fall in love very easily, right? Because in their mind, having sex constitutes love, even though the other person may have communicated with them that no, this is just sex and that's all I want, which further impacts their ability to remain in an insecure state because they're unaware of their motives, they're unaware of their intentions, right? And so casual sex is really a band-aid way of coping, right? It's a band-aid way of coping. It's surface. It's not going to be any deeper than that because they don't really desire the person who they are hooking up with. They don't desire an emotional connection. They don't desire to be in a committed relationship. And that's why they operate in forms of having casual sex because they only want the pleasure. They don't want the attachment. They don't want the commitment. And so, what this does for someone that's an anxious emotional attachment style, they continue to hinder themselves from processing their emotions, but it also hinders their emotional health and developing a healthier way to cope with that need, with that unmet need that they didn't receive, right? It continues to impact their self awareness of self. It continues to impact how they see themselves and for them to be able to give value to themselves, right? So, someone that's anxious is looking for their value in someone else. And when it comes to casual sex, they may give into having sex, right? Because they think maybe sometimes they believe that, if I have sex with this person, they are going to love me, right? But that doesn't happen. And so that's why it further impacts their mental health and their well being. And so let's talk about some of the risks associated with casual sex. Sex affects us hormonally, it affects us neurologically, and it affects us psychologically and forges a significant connection between people on a mental and emotional physical level. Sex was not created from my perspective, my Christian framework, to be casual. It was created to forge a bond, to forge connection, to forge intimacy, right? To deepen a relationship, not to just have our needs or our needs met, right? I think that it's much more than that, right? And again, this is from my Christian framework, okay? So I want to also state that although sex is good and there are benefits to having sex, I want to lift up some of the risks associated when we have casual sex with insecure emotional attachment styles. And I keep stressing the insecure emotional attachment styles because people who operate from insecure attachment styles, they not really meeting or getting what they didn't get. That unmet emotional need is still not met, even though they are using sex as a way of coping, right? So, a better way to be able to process or to deal with that unmet emotional need is to be able to uncover, is to be able to process, is to be able to work through. And so it can stem from unmet expectations, feelings of regret and disappointment. It can cause embarrassment. It can cause loss of respect. So we can lose respect for ourselves. And then the person who you engaged in casual sex with can also lose respect for you, right? So it's twofold. We can experience negative feelings after we engage in casual sex when we operate from an insecure attachment style. It can also impact our mental health, our well being, and how we understand and see ourselves, how we identify ourselves. It can also further um, cause us to have low self esteem, right? When we operate or we have sex, casual sex, from an insecure attachment style. Other risks can be feeling forced to engage in sexual activity. Again, someone that's anxious may have sex just to please someone, just to feel love, right? Just to have that connection, just to feel value in that moment, even though that moment is short-lived, right? So that void or that emptiness and that need to feel love is still going to be present after the sexual act, right? There also can be repercussions. It can hinder one's ability to commit in and have or experience a romantic relationship, right? Because based on your experience in these casual sex encounters, you bring that into your relationship when you attempt to have a relationship. And based on what you experienced, and those casual relationships can hinder the relationship that you desire because the way you operated and what you experienced, right? So it can be you felt rejected, you went in rejected, you felt rejected coming out, nothing has changed, right? And so that feeling of rejection you can bring into a relationship that you desire to have, right? And so tension can be created because of that. Because you project your past experience and you bring it into this new relationship that you're trying to forge and to build, right? And so insecure attachment styles, avoidant and anxious, and we also have disorganized, which that we talked about last week, is a combination between the two. So avoidant attachment. So if you have an avoidant attachment style and you participate in casual sex, you gravitate towards being not connecting, being a void of emotion. You may gravitate towards the lack of intimacy. You don't want to lay in the bed and hold them. You ain't trying to connect on that level, right? You trying to get your needs met and then they got to go, right? They got to leave, right? And so you tell yourself this messaging over and over and over again because you downplay the real need for you to have an emotional connection, for you to be able to experience an emotional connection. And so you downplay, right, the need to have or be connected to someone else, the need to form close bonds, the needs and the importance of being able to connect to someone else other than yourself, other than on a surface level, right? Because when we talked about romantic love in the beginning, we talked about that strong affection, that strong bond, that closeness, right? That bonding that takes place, right? On both parts, right? And so, because when you tell yourself this negative messaging, you can continue to experience that rejection. You can continue to lack the closeness that you didn't receive, the reassurance that you did not receive. So, when you remain in a state of or experiencing casual sex, you're never going to get what you truly missed, right? You're never going to get that unmet need fulfilled because you're covering it up and staying or remaining on a surface level, not really dealing with the deep pain, right? Of not receiving that need or that closeness in your early development. So rather than experience rejection, someone that is avoidant, um, they choose to remain to be in control because they don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to have a close connection because they don't want to be rejected. And this allows them to maintain control over their emotions. But their emotions have never been dealt with, have never been processed, and have never been uncovered. And so, in terms of avoidance, an avoidant attachment style shows how uncomfortable a person is with closeness and emotional, intimate relationships. People who are highly avoidant have unfavorable judgment calls about being in a romantic relationship or partnership because their whole focus is not wanting to be rejected. Their whole focus is remaining independent. I'm good and I'm good all by myself, right? And so they are intentional about avoiding physical intimacy. They are intentional about avoiding emotional connection. Someone with an anxious attachment style, they have sex because they seek love. They seek that unmet need that they didn't receive, right? And so, because there was an inconsistency early on in their development and there was a lack of them experiencing love, right? They use sex to receive love. But how many of us know that is not how we receive love? Sex, you can have sex and not experience love, right? Because we're talking about casual sex. People have casual sex all the time, and there is no love. There's no emotional connection. There's no commitment. There's no bond. There's no closeness, right? It's all surface. It's about getting that physical need met, and that is it, right? There's no relationship. And so when this occurs, it can cause a person who is anxious to develop these unhealthy ways of behaving, right? And so casual sex an unhealthy way is because because they don't get their needs met, right? They then begin to have regrets, right? Now, last week we learned about unhealthy ways of jealousy, unhealthy ways of being clingy and needy, right? So those unhealthy ways don't go away when you decide to have casual sex, right? You can become obsessed with the person who you had casual sex with, right? Which causes you to become needy and clingy because you desire to have this need met, but you're not getting it met because you're going about it the wrong way, right? Which can cause you to become sad, which can cause you to become depressed, which can hinder your mental state and your overall well-being and how you see and understand and identify the self, which causes you to develop a lower sense of self-worth and value, which you're trying to get. That's why a healthier, better way to be able to manage that is to uncover, is to go through therapy, is to be intentional about learning and discovering what is that unmet need that you didn't receive early on that you're searching for now. Right. And so when we go through the process of counseling and working through it, we're able to uncover some of these things and work through them, right? So that we can forge healthy relationships and that we learn self awareness and we learn how to love ourselves rather than looking for love in other people, right? Because we first have to love ourselves. And some additional risk when we look at insecure attachment styles is deactivating strategies, right? And some of these are avoiding self exposure, avoiding reliance, avoiding closeness, avoiding emotional commitment, right? And we see that in avoidant attachment styles, right? But for someone that's anxious, the need and the search, the consistency of searching for, trying to get love from someone else, right? And so we use sex as a way of coping rather than looking inward to be able to deal with the void and the emptiness. So, whereas anxious may feel taken advantage of because they didn't get what they wanted out of the sex, such as feeling and wanting and experiencing true love, that true connection, that true understanding of knowing that they value and they matter, right? And so those are some of the downfalls and risks when we engage in casual sex. But when we think of sex from a relationship, from a romantic standing, from a marital perspective, from a committed relationship, it means something completely different. And that's not saying that You can be in a marriage and you can be in a relationship and still operate in insecure ways, right? So you can still experience. So someone that's in a relationship, and let's say they have a secure partner, but they may be avoidant. The secure partner may experience them as emotionally detached, right? And someone that's in a relationship with a secure partner and they may be anxious, right? They may feel like they're not loved and they may constantly try to please this person and go out of their way to get that need met, right? But on a healthy continuum, right, it's really about balance. It's really about self awareness. It's really about knowing who we are and being able to love ourselves and not try to look for value and worth in other people, but be able to reauthor our story so that we can give that to ourselves. And when we're able to give that to ourselves, we're able to recognize our self-awareness. We're able to enter into relationships and be interdependent rather than codependent. We're able to recognize that we do need to be attached emotionally. We're able to be vulnerable, right? We're able to recognize that it's okay to collaborate and communicate with our partner about what we feel. We're able to communicate and collaborate with our partner about what we need, what we want, and what we desire. And together, we come together to be able to address. Together, we can come together to get help, to go to counseling so we can work this thing out, right? Because it's really about us being self aware. It's about us learning healthier ways to cope. It's about us being able to acknowledge the pain or the rejection that maybe we experience in our early developmental stage because we didn't get it from a caregiver. And now we're searching it out, right? It can also allow us to deal with the tensions or some of the tensions that may be present in our relationship, right? Because someone that's secure, when they're in a relationship with someone that's insecure, they can sense, especially if you are anxious, right? You are experienced by that secure person as needy and clingy, right? And so if you are in a relationship or in a marriage and your partner is secure but you are avoidant, right, the secure party may experience you as emotionally distant, and they have a desire to connect to you. And so it's important for us to be able to communicate this in our romantic relationships so we can get to a place of not perfection, but to a place where we can truly communicate honestly and be vulnerable with what we feel and what we think, what we experience, what we need, what we want, and we desire. But sometimes a lot of this is unaware. And so we're not communicating. Rather, we're behaving or we're acting out, right? And so we don't want to act out. We want to be able to communicate. We want to be able to collaborate. We want to be able to connect on a deeper level, right? We want to be in healthy relationships that is about the total wellness of the other because I care for you and you care for me, right? And because I care for you and you care for me and we are emotionally connected, we want the very best for the other person. And so when we are unaware of the why, it causes us to buy into a unhealthy narrative, fostering us to operate out of motives that don't benefit us, right? That don't benefit our well-being. So I want to encourage you to promote self-awareness, right? Because self-awareness permits us to explore our motives, which brings us to what we need, what we want, and what we desire, right? And causes us to further examine the what. What may be hindering you from entering into an emotional relationship? What may be hindering you from being able to be healthy, from having a sense of self awareness, from being able to value yourself? What may be hindering you from that? What may be hindering you from obtaining that connection and that bond that you didn't receive, right? What is that hindrance within you? So I hope that something I said inspires you to share this message with others so that we can continue to remain on this journey of wellness, this journey of wholeness, this journey of healing and restoration, this journey that allows us to reauthor our story, right? And again, it's not about being perfect, but it's about recognizing our value and our self worth. It's about being able to relate to people more than just on a surface level, but truly be able to experience a secure love, truly be able to experience interdependence rather than codependency, right? Truly be able to acknowledge, well, what is my motives? Why am I seeking out casual sex? Or why am I not able to connect to my partner? Or why am I withdrawing away from my partner? Right? Why am I constantly projecting my past into this relationship? Right? Why am I insecure? Why am I accusing my partner of cheating on me? Right? All of those can hinder the relationship from growing and developing into this collaboration, this deep sense of affection that's mutual, right? And that's interdependent. It also helps us develop an understanding of our emotional attachment and how our emotional attachment is present in our sexual lives, is present in our ability to be intimate. And intimate means into the other, right? So when we talked about the different types of casual sex, you'll notice that there is no intimacy because they're not into the other, right? It's all about self gratification. And so keep in mind that even though sex is good, using it as a way of coping is harmful, right? And additionally, we have to recognize that it's not in between our legs that matter, but it's what's in between our ears and what's inside of our heart that matters the most, right? So what are you carrying in your heart that's hindering you or keeping you from establishing or entering into a relationship that's mutual, that's built on love and self-respect of the other, that's focused on your overall well-being, that has nothing to do with manipulation, that has nothing to do with trying to please to get love, because you enter into the relationship and you already love yourself, right? You already value yourself, right? You're able to open up emotionally, right? And so know that it's what's in between your ears and what's in your heart that matters most. Remember that you define your worth. You define it, right? So I know that because of how we was raised, maybe we didn't get the attachment styles that we need. Maybe our parent or our caregiver didn't bond or meet every need, right? Right? They didn't teach us how to self-soothe, right? We didn't learn how to develop healthy ways of emotional attaching, right? But it's not too late. It's about us being intentional. It's about us being able to be vulnerable with ourselves and acknowledge what we feel and working through and going through the process so that we can become our best self, right? And so, again, remember that you define your worth. Know that you are valuable. Know that you are worthy, right? And you don't have to use sex as a way of coping. You don't have to use sex as a way of getting or receiving love, right? And so I want to encourage us to share this message, but also to begin to reauthor our story that allows us to redefine who we are, that allows us to gain a sense of self, that allows us to love ourselves, to see the worth and the value, the intrinsic value within us given to us by God, our Creator. Right? So I want to thank you for tuning into another Dr. Myrna Minute. And I look forward to seeing you on next Friday as we look at lament and insecure emotional attachments and how we lament because of the pain, right? That hasn't been tapped into, that hasn't been expressed, that hasn't been explored but covered up. And how, because of our insecure attachment, especially when we're looking at sex, can hinder if we're in a relationship, let's say, to speak. So if we're married and we go outside of our marriage and we are unfaithful, right? That causes our partner to lament because we've caused them pain and hurt. And so it's really important for us to be able to become aware of our motives, the why and the what, right? Behind what we do, behind why we have sex, behind why we're not able to emotionally connect. So, again, I want to thank you for tuning in on this Friday. And I pray that something I said has been enlightening and that you're able to share this message to others who may need it. And I look forward to seeing you here next Friday as we continue on week 3 of Love, Lust, and Lament. Be blessed, enjoy your weekend, and take some time to laugh. And remember to always, always know that you are worthy, that you are valuable, and that you are loved, and that God is the first teacher of what it means to be or have a secure attachment because God loves us first. Be blessed.